hopefully you've got somebody at your table who's agreed to report back. What we want you to do is, we have a lot of tables. I mean, if you notice, there's like 200 and some people here today. So we have a lot of tables, so you're not going to have a lot of time. But everything you've written down, we're going to collect up at the end, and again, it'll be summarized, and you'll everybody get everybody's ideas at that point. But what we want you to do is really, one person at each table, pick one or two key points. Please be short. Don't repeat what somebody else has already said, because we want to hear the variety of things that are out there. We need to, maybe you want to say one thing is what's the most important thing that you're working on right now, and the other thing is what do you want from the state to help you do that?
A big part of our conversation on what is your top energy climate change priority was one of the biggest challenges, that one of the places that we can benefit the most is if we can find a way to renew our old housing stock. And in some of our older communities, we have great potential for a new thriving economy, but the problem is there's a delta between the cost of doing those energy retrofit projects and the benefit that our consumer will receive after they've paid all that money. And so the biggest challenge that we have is liquidity. There's not enough financing or funding to leverage our consumer to help them accomplish that. And so, and the cost of energy hasn't gone up enough to drive the demand for that. So we talked about how can we find a way to create policy or do something that will directly benefit small business owners who want to get in the game, who want to profit and make money, but they're not able to because they just can't find a way to pencil out these projects. So liquidity and establishing financing or funding. And then the second question, what is the number one thing that the state could do to support this priority? Create policy that puts the money only into projects that will directly drive economic growth and opportunity. Find a way to support small business owners who want to get back to work, but they can't find a way to pencil out these projects.
Okay, for the majority of the group here, their top climate change and energy policies, they're just trying to develop their regional climate action plans right now. That's been a big priority for Western Riverside and VCREA. And and there was a lot of discussion about the difficulty in getting data and that kind of thing. The other question was what can the state do, and what we all kind of agreed on is we need a little more flexibility and support in implementing all the policies that have been directed for us to develop. So we're getting those policies done, we've got these policies, it's great, but now we need some support to implement them. We actually, a lot of us don't just focus on one thing. We have a lot of other hats that we wear, and we need support to ideas, we need flexibility. We can't, there's different boxes of things that we have to comply with, and we need to maybe be able to integrate them a little better.
Top energy climate change priority, we're looking at localizing our services, especially for hard-to-reach cities. Some of the areas in the communities that we serve are very small, very rural, so that's kind of where we're going right now, is trying to make those programs effective for them. And then the number one thing the state could do to help with that priority, mainly what we're looking at is leveraging that existing funding from the utilities, but one of the things that we thought would be very helpful is creating regionalized savings goals. A lot of times, if they're statewide goals or those kinds of things, that sometimes the lowest hanging fruit in the more densely populated areas tend to receive maybe a lot more service and those kinds of things. So we're really looking at maybe incentivizing those providers to find a way to want to provide that service in some of these harder to reach areas.
The support from the state would be funding for implementing the climate action plan and the energy action plans to kind of bring all those siloed interests that often compete, like wastewater and transportation and energy efficiency and those things that are covered under the climate action plans and the energy action plans and get them to the implementation phase.
There's just a barrage of responsibilities that folks are responsible for implementing and being compliant with. And what we really need is a more comprehensive strategy that at least looks to see what are all the different pieces. And it's not always energy. There's other environmental things that are going to happen that are going to directly impact our energy supply, whether it's delta flow criteria. You have South Coast AQMD limits on where power plants can be built. A lot of different things are going on that are going to have a climate impact and that are going to impact utility decisions. And so we really need to figure out how do those all talk together so that as we're implementing and trying to seek compliance, we're doing so in the most effective and coordinated fashion possible. And to that extent, similar to, I think, the message we heard from both of the commissioners, is that we need to start treating utilities and some of these folks not as the problem, but as more of a collaborative resource to achieve these goals. I think that the utilities of California have a pretty good track record across the board in most cases of trying to be compliant on time in an aggressive fashion. And so as we're moving into more advanced, more complicated policies and programs, we're really going to have to figure out a way to work more closely together, not just in the traditional command and control, go blame someone. So I was really excited to hear McAllister talk about more of a carrot than a stick. We've had a stick for a really long time. Carrot would be great.
Most of what we discussed had to deal with the first issue, where not only identifying projects, but getting to the retrofits on our existing building stock and needing funding for that. But the other issue we discussed was the goal of carbon neutrality. And the main thing the state could do to help was to be consistent with its goals as far as what it's requiring for carbon neutrality and reduction and those sorts of things.
Some of the ones that have not been discussed yet would be the focus on community outreach, education, and engagement. Getting more people involved, because there's been a lot of voluntary measures already undertaken, but getting people to be more aware and non-complacent so that energy efficiency becomes the norm would be one of the areas that we'd like to focus on. And then on the second question, money, funding would be great. Focusing on public dollars and also digging down a little bit further as far as the state reaching out to develop a champion would be one area that we discussed, to have somebody on each team to filter down the idea of energy efficiency so that it carried through the whole organization.
Everyone has a different agenda from their local agency, and they don't necessarily align directly with the policies out there. That's a challenge. And one of the challenges within that is, how do you continue to keep energy efficiency as a priority when there's so many other things competing? That's a major issue. And so one of the responses we saw was that, how can we make the funding more flexible so that we may have a standard goal that we reach, but the means to get there can be customized to each local agency, so they can have their own culturally specific conversation with their decision makers so they can maintain that priority.
So an issue we haven't heard yet dealt with streetlights and whether or not they are owned by the municipal utility or the municipal local government or by the utilities, and to what extent, who takes care of the maintenance and who is retrofitting them. In some cases, it's the local government, but in some cases, they are owned by the utility and they are not necessarily updating and retrofitting them. An issue of code enforcement being an unfunded mandate, and so a lot of discussion then on what the state could do to help code enforcement activities, standards, more marketing, dedicated resources for that. So definitely.
I'll just say, I think I would love to have interaction. Not sure exactly what the appropriate level of aggregation is, because diversity is good, but you can't have every city in the state, in the room. But some way to have a dialogue on that issue and figure out what local governments actually need. And there are a number of agencies, including the governor's office, who actually have people that are very interested in solving this problem. And so I think there's a lot of positive energy around this. So, maybe through Pat we can continue this discussion. Yeah.
So our table focused a lot on the local innovations, and there's so many going on, and what we see as the greatest thing in need is that process improvements at the state level continue to evolve with that adaptation that the local communities are doing. There's so many things, from community choice aggregation to these regional programs to local initiatives mentioned, where we just need the flexibility to adopt and implement and fund those programs as they come about to accomplish these rather robust state goals, because it's going to take a long way to get to the robust goals that the state has set. And we're going to have the flexibility at the local level to take chances and to learn things without going through the normal process. The process has to evolve with that. And of course, everybody wants more money, so please.
Liz from Sonoma County. Our ask of the state would be around the transportation energy nexus, and to ask to determine a process or system to integrate battery electric vehicle charging into the net zero energy equation for nighttime home charging and daytime workplace charging for the renter population.
There's kind of a little bit of a tension between just the basic costs of energy and then the potential for needing some type of new mandates or incentives for getting to the existing buildings. So the two recommendations to address each of these kind of different priorities, one was to incentivize the real estate community to encourage sellers to go through energy efficiency retrofits, and this is a purely voluntary program. And then the other side of that is mandatory disclosure for energy use in residential at time of sale, just as there is mandatory disclosure that will at some point be required for commercial, God only knows when.
One of the messages is getting people to take action, and that's through saving energy, saving money, and take crap out of the air. And then also we spoke about financing. I know a lot of other people voiced that as well. As far as what the state can do, we spoke about just translating policy into layman's terms. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. And then also there's talking about assuring that strategies do not conflict. And then really truly integrating DR and energy efficiency and on the proceeding side. So.
So our table agreed that one of our top priorities is meeting and or exceeding the renewable portfolio standard, and what the state can do to help would be to continue the development and management of a smart grid, not only to help with the changes in demand and reliability that an RPS would bring, but also to keep people more in tune with how and when they are using energy, and that can make a difference. And then because I was out of the room as I was elected the spokesperson, I didn't have permission to say this, but I also will say what the state could do was it would be super if the cap and trade auction monies were paid back swiftly so that we could actually put them to work in our communities.
During the last program cycle, we conducted about 200 comprehensive energy audits in SMB facilities, the small and medium businesses. And we identified a pretty critical gap in that third-party programs offer measures and technologies that are really only applicable to larger entities, to larger facilities. So if there was some way to meet that gap for the SMB customer sector and to implement it in such a way that's cost effective and not confusing to the SMB customer, that would be very valuable.
We have Mr. Jim Lynn here from Department of Water Resources, and obviously all the local governments at the table. And we all know that water and energy are both inextricably linked, as Commissioner Farron said earlier. However, the majority of our table here is in San Diego, and obviously we're very, very vulnerable. We import the majority of our water, and for those efforts where we're trying to build local capacity, it would definitely be beneficial if we could get some assistance from the state on the permitting process and making that process easier.
Two wonderful but distinct priorities in the next year, one is to look to reframe the climate change planning process to emphasize more about economic and health benefits and kind of move away from kind of the tricky term of climate change with some constituents. And secondly, the great work that's going on in Chula Vista is focusing on energy efficiency outreach to the youth. Because as we all know, the next generation has to be educated and well-versed to hopefully kind of re-educate us a little bit and also educate their peers. And then in terms of what the state could do to support these priorities, I mean, the number one goal would be, low-interest financing. And on a side note, I just to the state, advertising and marketing is really crucial in this field because I feel like we're fighting a battle against major corporations who have tremendous advertising budget, so I feel if there was more creative and innovative resources for cities to kind of market all the great work they're doing, that could be a really helpful tool for city governments and also for the state to help push that along. So that's just a side note.
Great.
One of the things that we did as part of the program for the cycle is settle on Energy Upgrade California as a brand for a broader class of energy efficiency programs. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Those of you who know about branding and marketing, you want to be careful you don't confuse consumers and dilute what they already understand and so on. We had a program that the PUC, I think, kicked off. I forgot what it's called, Engage 360. I'm not a marketing expert. I couldn't remember it. I'm not a marketing expert, but when I came and said, it doesn't say what this is about, it's hard to understand, and our process for implementation was deeply, deeply flawed. So we quickly decided to kill that, put the effort into Energy Upgrade California. I know it's not a perfect brand. I've been told that by people who are more expert, but I'm hoping that is something that you all have already used in another context, and we can keep pushing. I think it says kind of what it means to, which is it's about energy, it's about improvement, it's about California and local, and I hope we can put a little more horsepower and some money, to the extent we have that, behind getting the word out.
So we had a great conversation at our table, and I guess first off, we recognize that local governments are sort of at different stages along the energy efficiency process. So in recognizing that, though, we did realize that there was sort of overarching themes for success, and whatever priority each of us wanted to choose was making sure that there are now tools for implementing things in our CAP, not just planning for CAPs, so making that transition, as well as resources to educate other folks in our local governments, so in other departments, and especially at the city leadership level, city managers, elected officials, because it doesn't go anywhere without their buy-in. As far as what the state and others could do to help support these kind of broad priorities, making programs, having local governments help design and deliver programs that are straightforward to consumers. Because sometimes we do this full time and I can't keep all the programs straight in my head. And then also the access to data is critical. I mean, we don't know what's even working in our community, so I'm not sure how we can implement a successful climate action plan. And then the only final thing is that expanding or changing the way the program cycles are. We felt like we spent a third of our program cycle ramping up or ramping down. So if there's any way that it can be more consistent and rolling in a way that makes it more effective and efficient in the long run. Thank you.
Thanks.
We were talking about challenges at the local level, and there seemed to be a lack of ability to have the right data to drive participation. And there are many, many entities that are collecting data, but it's not all getting to a place where it is accessible or where it is ultimately usable at the local level to be relevant to those participants. So that really is the priority that we came up with at our table, which was to create, and this is what the state can do as well, is to create that statewide approach to the aggregation and reporting and sharing of that data, and to provide tool sets that then allow, at the local level, folks of pretty widely varying capacities to use that data to have insights about their communities, to identify how markets have been developed or transformed, and then to use that data to target not specific individuals or specific businesses, but to target segments where the most benefit can be achieved. And again, all relevant at the local level.
We only had one local agency at our table, but really what their focus is on is energy efficiency and how it relates to water, much like Liana said over there. And the one thing that the state can do is, we were thinking that provide more funding. I know it was echoed many times as well, but funding and or positions to help implement the climate action plans or sustainability programs that the cities already have in place.
Great.
A lot of the issues have already been brought up, but one that we brought up is meeting the AB 32 requirements is a top priority, and also developing more of an understanding of our electeds of what the long-term energy plan means and what we need to do to get there. As far as help goes, again, flexibility and financing options, and maybe looking more on the life cycle cost rather than straight, simple payback for these deeper retrofits we're looking at.
A good discussion. Engaging stakeholders, of course, and education and outreach are key. What the state could do, some specifics, were potentially lowering the minimum threshold for unbilled financing, and also just the continuation of the SEEC low-interest loans that were really successful.
Either you want to respond at all to anything that's been said, or?
Certainly on the information issues and sort of the resources that you need to do what you have to do, very much aware of those issues. And I think, we tend to see us, at the agency level, up and down the food chain, having similar issues of not enough resources to go around to do what's necessary. But the local level is really where the rubber hits the road, and I think there's an increasing appreciation of that. And really, these messages get mediated through you, ultimately, to the citizens who were asking to actually make changes in the way they live their lives. And so I think that just fundamental recommendation or recognition is, one of the main, again, takeaways for me. Our program environments at the two agencies are different, so our kind of the levers that we have to pull are different. But for example, the ECA program, I think I've been very heartened. The low interest loan program that the Energy Commission has run for a number of years I was really heartened by the discussion in the legislature that really the brand of that program is pretty rock solid, and I think it's going to have some. And that's because of the great work that it's done and the staff that's really provided that long-term consistency at the commission. But that's, I think, a vehicle, a vessel for funding ongoing that, obviously with your ongoing support, hopefully the legislature will see fit to keep kicking some money in, budget year after budget year. But new initiatives are difficult to get going, and I think I would just again make the call for if there are things you like or don't like in the AB 758 action plan. A lot of that does go to existing buildings. It has the potential to consolidate resources. One thing I didn't say in my presentation was that the reason we're trying to adopt the final action plan this fall, so we have a couple months here to really take the draft, evolve it into a final that's ready for prime time, and then adopt it at the commission, and that then can feed into, the timing is planned to feed into the PUC's development of the 2015 to 17 portfolio to inform and direct those programs. And so the existing building programs in the portfolios going forward are going to really benefit from having a good, robust, valuable set of strategies and initiatives to push forward. So I really, again, it's a call for your collaboration and input on that. But I want to just thanks for all the good ideas. Really looking forward to getting the summary. I was scribbling madly here, but would love to have something more systematic. And thank you all for being with us.
Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming. One of the themes which came through is this issue around data. And I don't know if Steve Malnight is still here from PG&E. He may have had another commitment. And I had some corridor conversations around this. We at the PUC have kicked off a proceeding, and remember my diagram with the battleship. It's to work through the issues around data, and our approach is to, at least the concept is to have a data warehouse in which this information is stored, and that people who have the right kind of access rights can access that kind of data, and to deal with the issues around confidentiality through technology and so on. Great idea. I hope that my children are around to see that implemented. I have an 8-year-old, so we do have some time to get there. In all seriousness, I think data is so absolutely critical, and we have to figure out a way to break the logjam, which I think is being held for good reasons around client confidentiality and the like. But I really am quite frustrated when I hear examples of how, the right release forms have been signed, the data, everything is all, the boxes have all been ticked, but the data is not materializing because of constraints at the utility side. And so what I would urge you to do is to help. I think one way to do that is to be as specific as you can and to make as much noise as you can. And I am here to offer the services of my offices to try to fix that. So I think there is no excuse for a situation where you have a program in place, you have the the sign-offs from the participants, but you can't get the data in a timely manner to help drive continual improvements in it. So if there are other ideas that people have, I'm really looking for, in addition to following the cycles of long-term proceedings and getting the lawyers to argue about why we can and cannot do things, where things exist, we need to make them work, and we need to find ways to get the sand out of the machinery. So I'm open to any ideas to help do that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We're really glad that you're here. We're really glad you had the opportunity to talk with them as a group, but also they'll be here for a little bit longer. You can talk to them individually too. So we're a little bit behind, but we do have, thank you. Yep. Yeah.